What's the difference between, I mean, I'm kind of a rookie to
Sure.
CMYK, but the RGB color?
RGB is red, green, blue, and that's basically
For video, for
That's-
computer.
yeah, that's
For
where if you're
digital.
going to see it, if you're going to see it on a screen, RGB is the best because you can have some more vivid colors.
Okay.
CMYK is if that's going to be like transported into,
All
you
right,
know,
okay.
CMYK
Printed, yeah.
plates.
It's gonna be
You know, if that's going to be
printed,
physically
yeah.
printed,
Got it.
you want to do CMYK. So let's make this guy. Let's make him red. Let's say. And so real quickly you can. I'm not doing anything.
The layer is still white, like it's still opaque.
You
above.
got
Oh
it.
yeah, yeah, good point. Thank you. Yep. Yeah, I actually knew what I was doing. I was just hoping you guys would catch me.
Just testing.
So here's so let's turn that on multiply. And yep. So then I'm quickly drawing, blah blah blah, drawing.
I do have a question about multiply because
Yeah.
every time I've tried to use multiply in the past, like
Yep.
with a black and white line art layer, like you can actually see the color a lot of times. Like especially if you ever try to use like colored lines,
Mm-hmm.
like do another multiplier on top of that. Okay.
I would actually, in that case, I would turn off the multiply layer completely.
Yeah, I usually just clear out the white, but I don't know if that's okay.
So what I would do is, I'm going to go through a quick process here, but I'm going to bitmap this whole thing, blah blah blah, and then bring it back, because we'll change some of these lines on this guy to simulate what you were talking about. Okay, so we're back in CMYK. This guy's got crisp lines, which is what we want. So instead of multiply on our line art layer, we'll name that again. What I'm going to do is use another tool that we haven't talked about, but which you'll use all the time, which is the wand tool. And again, this has the anti-aliased versus aliased features to make sure anti-aliased is not checked. So to me, this means it's crisp. I'm going to uncheck in contiguous. This means that when I press this in white, it's going to select every single thing that's white on this whole canvas. So I just did that. Everything that's white is highlighted. I'm going to hit delete, and it's gone.
Okay.
And so this is what I do. Like, let's make the outside of just his face blue. And actually, here's a good example. We're going to bring in the lasso tool. Not aliased, good. We're going to get right up to the edge of his face. Oh, messed that up here. And I'm being really precise on these lines, but right here you can see I'm just kind of going really quickly because obviously I'm not touching any black lines, so that's not going to be affected at all. So I'm just going around and around. And you can either double click right now to connect it or close in until you see the circle. Okay, so I've got the paint bucket. I'm going to choose my blue. Make it a little bit lighter. Oh, here's another thing. In CMYK, if you get a little sort of, this is a warning symbol, this means that it's out of the gamut or it's not going to print pretty, basically. So just touch that, and the computer will automatically sort of move the color to a more appropriate color. So that's something to keep in mind. All right, so I'm going to tap in there, and we've got blue, and it was on contiguous, so it only, like, these lines are in our field, but they're not touching. Does everybody get what contiguous is?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
If it's not, it'll color everything that's black, basically, in that area.
Exactly. And I would, oh, I can't even. Okay, we're not going to talk about contiguous, I guess. Anyway. So. All right, so we've got his face blue. So let's go back to where we were. Let's get our flats layer.
So why do you drag the layer underneath your line art instead of on top of it? I usually just stack my two layers on top and just hit multiply on both of them.
I think because I like to stay away from multiplies as much as possible, just because I think in the output that might mess things up, or something like Ryan said, you might see colors coming through that you don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
So if I think about this, like, these are physical opaque black line art layers, and they're going to be over over the color.
Okay.
But again, I mean, to everyone, you know, to each his own. Whatever looks good to you is probably, and whatever feels best is the way to go. Now, if we're going to flat underneath this guy, there are probably 100 different ways you can do this. I'll show you 2 right away. One is to use our lasso tool, our trusty lasso tool, and basically just create a shape underneath, as close in the middle of these lines as possible. And try to go a little bit quicker here.
Yeah.
This is what I do all day. All right, so we're gonna hit G. Go back here to our paint bucket.
What did G do?
G is your paint bucket, and it's the same. G also does your gradient, depending on what is touched, and we can touch on a gradient later. So I've just tapped in there, and he is colored. Now I'm going to show you another way to do that, which is to use the pencil tool. And again, we want to use the pencil tool and not the brush tool because you don't want those soft edges in case you want to change your color later. Now, there's a problem here because I'm working underneath, like you said, John, but I can't see where I'm going. So the way I'm going to fix that is I'm just going to drop my opacity on this layer. And that obviously I can always bring the opacity back to 100, so I'm not messing up that layer at all by doing that. And so now you can clearly see how close you are to the middle there. And just go quickly here. This is fun. I kind of feel like Bob Ross a little bit.
They're happy trees.
Yeah, like happy trees.
Right there. Oh, very good.
Happy flatting here. All right.
So Kevin, when would you use the pencil tool as opposed to the selection tool?
Xander, that's a great question. I think if you know what. So imagine you're drawing a skyscraper or a skyline with lots of straight lines, lots of buildings. Then I would use probably the lasso tool because you can quickly touch one the bottom of the building, then touch to the top of the building, and you can move around pretty quickly and create those shapes. Whereas if you're drawing something really organic, like right now I'm coloring a graphic novel where an artist uses a lot of, not really any ink lines, but a lot of rough, loose pencil lines. And so it's a lot of me, going like this and trying to find his lines and sort of needing a soft shape. Whereas if I used, the lasso tool, it's going to end up being kind of sharp. And of course, now the lasso tool, one thing we haven't talked about is that there's a soft version up here where you can actually draw like that, and that does end up being pretty nice. But if you mess up, I don't know, it takes a while of getting used to. So whether you do this or drawing with the pencil tool, it's up to you. Now I want to, let's get rid of all this stuff here. I want to drive home the point one more time about not using the brush tool to do flatting. So let's go into the brush tool, and we're going to do the same exact thing. And boy, it sure looks like exactly what we were doing before. Sure looks pretty. And now we're going to hit G again, go to the paint bucket, and let's watch what happens. You guys see it already? Mm-hmm. Yep. So these beautiful edges have ruined our drawing, and that is why I always stick with the pencil tool. Let's clean those up there. All right, how much time do we have left?
1 minute.
1 minute? All right, in 1 minute I'm going to talk about another favorite thing, which is masking layers. So let's say I want a gradient on this guy. I'm going to create a new layer. Go back to G, where was that? Okay, gradient. Let's give him a red gradient. And drag it like that. Okay, so this is exactly what I want, except right now the gradient's covering the entire canvas. I only want it to go over this guy's body. So what I'm going to do is go into my flats layer down here, hit my W selection tool, my magic wand. Okay, so I've just selected, remember that area that we drew earlier, so if you want, you can check, you can zoom in, everything's crisp, it's right on that line. And what I'm going to do, go down here, and this white circle inside a black circle, that's your mask mode. So I'm going to go to the gradient layer, and I'm going to tell the computer, just show me the gradient through the selection that I've got right now. So click that, and it creates this gray mask. And what's nice is that because this is a separate layer, again, I can multiply it, make it a little bit darker, change the opacity. And another fun thing, in the 30 seconds we have, this little paper clip says that these two things are connected. But let's say I want to change the gradient. Let's say I want a little deeper red on the bottom here. So I'm going to uncheck this to tell the computer not to connect these. Hit V and make sure I've selected the gradient itself. And I'm just going to move that up a little bit. Or move it down. So the mask itself, is still there. So it's like this window that we're looking through. But I can move that around, and I can draw, I can do whatever, and it stays within the mask. So yeah. So I guess that's all we have time for. These are some basics of Photoshop, and hope you've learned something new today. Thanks everybody for coming.